Welcome to Michigan Planning Today. I am Bob Gibbs, your guest, and we're going to focus on the City of Troy's Big Beaver Corridor Master Plan. I'm very pleased to welcome our guest, Brent Savidant. Brent is the Planning Director for the City of Troy. Welcome, Brent.
Thanks, Bob. Great to be here.
Tell us about the City of Troy.
City of Troy is a city, the largest city in Oakland County. It's got a population of about 85,000, and it has a daytime population of well over 100,000. So it's a unique situation where our daytime population is actually higher than our nighttime population. We are the location of a number of Fortune 500 companies, as well as other national and state companies. We're the 10th largest city in Michigan. A median household income of 96,000 people, also a very educated population.
That's great. And the City of Troy is located on the eastern part of Oakland County.
Yeah, northern part of Oakland County, northeastern part of Oakland County. It's an outer ring suburb of the city of Detroit.
All right. Well, tell me about Big Beaver Road and what the Big Beaver Corridor study is.
So the Big Beaver is the most important corridor that runs east and west through the city of Troy. It's our busiest corridor, and as Troy grew, you see an image here on the screen. You see it's characterized by a 204-foot right-of-way, very busy road. There's about 50,000 cars a day that go up and down Big Beaver, so it's extremely busy. And as you see from this image, there's a number of very large, very tall office buildings that provide a lot of jobs, but you'll notice they're surrounded for the most part by parking, somewhat underutilized parking spaces, and they're set back fairly far from Big Beaver. They have very little relationship with Big Beaver Road. So in 2006, the city wanted to develop Big Beaver as a world-class corridor. So we hired a consultant, Birchall Royal, to help us with coming up with a vision for Big Beaver. And we came up with the Big Beaver Corridor study, which includes a number of recommendations for how Big Beaver should look and how to improve Big Beaver so that it could be a 24-hour place, more walkable, more of a people place, and eventually create a world-class corridor.
Yeah, with 50,000 cars per day, it's almost a major highway, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's also controlled by the Road Commission, which presents some challenges because we're not actually a responsible entity for that road.
And it includes all land uses, residential, major shopping centers, major office, major employment centers.
It does. What you see on the slide on the screen, we incorporated the Big Beaver Corridor study into our master plan when we comprehensively updated our master plan in 2008. It was the first comprehensive master plan effort in about 40 years. So we recognize that one of the most important goals of that master plan was to improve Big Beaver. We implemented our recommendations in our zoning ordinance that was updated comprehensively in 2011.
What is a zoning ordinance and what is a master plan?
Yeah, a master plan is the vision for your community. How the residents and elected officials and planning commission want that community to look for the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years in the future. It is a policy document. And a zoning ordinance is a law, and it's a tool that's used to implement the policy of the master plan. It's actually required by state law that if you have a zoning ordinance, you have a law to regulate land uses, that it's required to be based on a master plan. In fact, there's state law that requires that master plans be updated at least looked at every 5 years to ensure they're still up to date.
And then the zoning ordinance tells property owners what to expect to be developed around them and what kinds of uses are permitted on the property.
Yes, yeah, and our zoning ordinance was really a paradigm shift in 2011. We had I would say a typical suburban type zoning ordinance that most suburban communities, post-World War II communities, that's how they regulated land use, which is, as I indicated earlier, tall buildings, large parking lots, and the controlling factor really was separation of land uses. Offices were to be separated from residential, which would be separated from industrial, and so on. And there wasn't this mixed-use concept. It was actually mandated in most suburban areas that uses be separated from each other. So in 2011, in part because we had done this Big Beaver corridor study, we recognized that there was significant value in mixing land uses, not only horizontally on a site, but also vertically on a site. So, in other words, having a mix of uses within a building, as you're an expert in, Bob, having retail, for example, on the first floor, and then residential and/or office above, creates more vibrant, more walkable, more quality type places. And we wanted to incorporate this concept into Big Beaver.
I think the city of Troy is unique in Oakland County in that it really has allowed high-rise buildings to be built along the corridor. I think you've got some buildings that are more than 10 stories tall.
We do. In fact, our tallest building is about 25 stories. And we not only permit higher buildings, we actually encourage higher buildings.
Why would the city encourage such large buildings?
For a number of reasons. One is I talked earlier about how the buildings that were built immediately after the war and between post-World War into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, large buildings that were set back far from the street as part of the separation of land uses. The relationship with Big Beaver was really minimal. So people that were in automobiles or walking on Big Beaver really did not relate to the buildings, and the buildings did not relate to the street. And that's a lost opportunity. And if you want to create place, it's very important that the buildings relate to the street. And there's various ways that we did that with our zoning ordinance, but we actually, instead of setback requirements, which requires the building to be pushed back far from the street, we actually have build-to lines where we mandate that the building be built in close proximity to Big Beaver. We also have requirements where there's functioning windows and doors that you can see in and out of, so that pedestrians can actually enter and leave the building on Big Beaver and relate to the street.
Speaking of placemaking, here's an image from your 2006 master plan for Big Beaver. I think this was prepared by Birchler Royal, now Giffords Webster, and
Yes.
Grissom Metz. What is this sketch illustrating?
Well, you'll notice, if you compare this to the first image that you showed of Big Beaver, which was predominantly automobiles and parking lots, what jumps out from on this slide is people. The activity is people, and the automobiles are in the background. And that's not to say that automobiles are not important. Obviously, you and I both arrived here by automobile, and they're an important part of everyday life. However, we wanted to define Big Beaver in a different way, which was having buildings that related to the street, that had multiple uses, where you could accomplish multiple different things with one trip. For example, you could park the car, you could go to work, you could also walk to a restaurant, or walk to a dentist, for example, and bring more vibrancy and make it more of a 24-hour place.
So the buildings have restaurants and shops on the first level, and there's sidewalks along the streetway with landscaping and streets.
Exactly.
It's really quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So this is one of the buildings built along Big Beaver Road. This is at Crooks in Big Beaver. Is this reflective of the plan?
It is, and the reason I thought this image was important was this was, believe it or not, the first building that was developed after we adopted the Big Beaver corridor study. This site was a gas station that sat vacant for a long time. It was an eyesore, and we had a developer who was interested in putting a Starbucks here. He wanted to put a drive-through on the site, but it was too small. But he ended up putting this Starbucks restaurant here. By all accounts, very successful, even though it's located at a very busy intersection. I told you before, the traffic counts on Big Beaver is about 50,000 cars a day. On Crooks, I'm going to guess it's at least half that. So you've got about 75,000 cars whizzing by. But on a summer day, you've got people sitting outside enjoying the sunshine.
The building is unique because it's pulled up to Big Beaver Road with a patio, and then where's the parking?
The parking's in the back. Parking's in the back. Lots of glass, so it brings the street activity into the building, and also lets people who are driving by see the activity in the building and think to themselves, hey, maybe I should pull over and grab a coffee.
And that all contributes to making it more walkable.
Exactly.
This is another building on Big Beaver, and this is at Coolidge, the Ocean Prime Restaurant.
Yeah, this is the second building that was so I'm trying to tell a narrative here and show you how we've kind of evolved. over time. This is the second building that was developed after the corridor study. Ocean Prime, this was located at the corner of Coolidge and Big Beaver in front of a large office complex. And it's a beautiful building. What's significant with this building is the quality of architecture, lots of glass and metal and brick and stone, but the quality of this outdoor seating. This is it's a high-end restaurant, a very quality restaurant. And you see in this image on a sunny day, you can't find a seat outside. People want to be outside, and this, when you drive by, this is what you see instead of an empty parking lot.
Even though it's on a busy corner,
yep.
Probably 70,000 cars per day going by in this corner. And this is a great example of another restaurant contributing to making it more walkable.
That's right.
Here's a view of Big Beaver looking east. This is from the Somerset Collection Mall. And you can see Big Beaver is a major highway. It looks like it's 6 lanes or so, plus turning lanes with a large boulevard down the middle.
Absolutely. And it shows you how dynamic and how busy the city is. It also shows you the opportunity that we have for infill and for doing more on the corridor.
Right, and I think the Ocean Prime is a good example of infill. That was a parking lot to an office building.
That's right.
And the developer just took a piece of property used for parking and put a commercial use on it.
It added not only activity to the Big Beaver corridor, but added value to the property and to the tax base for the city of Troy.
It's got to be a big win for the developer to get additional developable property like that.
And I would guess it would probably help lease office space in the building next door.
Yeah, I read a survey recently that the number one thing employees want today is to be able to walk to restaurants and shops while they're working.
Yep.
So here's a view, I think, of the our planner's sketch of the proposed for Big Beaver. How is this different from the existing conditions?
Well, you see the activity on the sidewalks, and you see the placement of the buildings closer to the street. You still dominated by automobiles because it is a 204-foot right-of-way with 6 lanes of traffic, but you start to bring more of a pedestrian scene, more activity, more things to do, more places to spend money, more destinations to walk to and from. This is what we intend to accomplish over the long term.
Well, the city of Troy is unique, I think, because it doesn't have a real downtown, a walkable downtown, does it?
That's correct.
A lot of commercial and residential shopping hoods, but shopping districts.
Right.
But it doesn't have a downtown, so this would help give the city a downtown in a way, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the goal is to create the opportunity for a downtown. We missed that boat 120 years ago, but we can still have a vibrant, successful major corridor that runs through the middle of the city.
Here's another building on Big Beaver Road. This is looks like a restaurant and shops. Tell us about this building.
This is called the Galleria of Troy. There's a number of buildings that front on Big Beaver. This is located on the north side of Big Beaver, just west of I-75. I didn't include a slide here, but behind these buildings are hotels. So the owner of these buildings also owns the hotels, and he's managed to create a development where hotel guests can park their car, stay at a great new hotel, and walk to numerous restaurants along Big Beaver. This is also, I was very excited when this was constructed, because this gave me an opportunity to walk to lunch for the first time. For years, I would have to get in my car and drive. And with a 30-minute lunch, by the time you get in your car, drive, grab lunch, you have to eat at your desk. This was a walking destination.
This really illustrates the best practices of planning today, because the buildings are up to Big Beaver Road. There's wide sidewalks, patios, and dining. Really nice buildings with a lot of glass and restaurants on the first level. And then the parking, again, is in the back.
Absolutely. And what's interesting here is to the right of the picture is a public sidewalk. To the left of that sidewalk, that's privately owned. But where that line is, where the private property ends and where the public property begins, is very unclear, and it really doesn't matter. So someone going for a walk down the public sidewalk can veer off and sit on the bench, or they can, if they have a gum wrapper, they can throw it in the garbage can, or they can go into the restaurant or sit outside. So it's strengthening and improving that pedestrian realm.
Brent, looking at this, it seems so logical to do this, that you would want the building up to the sidewalk, you'd want patios along the sidewalk and the parking in the back. But it's really very visionary and unusual for cities to do that. Almost every city we work with still allows the parking to be in the front, the buildings to be set in the back, and then stormwater retention's behind us. So this is very visionary.
It's visionary, but it's a lot of work. You have to stick to your guns. You really do, because there's a lot of developers who don't understand the vision that we have for the city, and they don't care. They want to sell hamburgers or Subway sandwiches or whatever. So it's very important that you stick to your vision and you apply the laws equally to everybody.
So sometimes you find a little resistance to this proposal from developers?
Yes, especially developers. Sometimes developers, when they build out their tenant spaces, they use architects from out of state who've never been to Big Beaver and don't see what we're trying to accomplish. So sometimes it's an education process.
Here's another newer building on Big Beaver, and this illustrates from an aerial point how the building is a large building, but it's up to the sidewalk with patios and doors on the sidewalk and the parking in the back. So it would be hard to achieve the walkability if these were flipped around, if the building were in the back and the parking were in the front?
It would. Now this building was actually approved as a PUD, but the Big Beaver corridor plan was in place at the time, so we used elements and applied elements of the plan to this project. Notice in the bottom left corner there's a bank drive-through. It was important to the bank to have that drive-through, but it was important to the city that drive-through not negatively impact walkability on the site. So notice how it was placed behind the front of that building. With a architectural element, like a tower element on the front of that building, which announces that building. They still have their drive-through, but it doesn't dominate the site. It's in the background, and it plays a lesser role.
I'm sure it takes a lot of work and a lot of negotiating back and forth.
Definitely.
To have that happen.
Definitely.
Tell us about yourself, Brent. You are an AICP, which means you're a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners.
Yes, that's true.
Where are you from, and how did you get interested in planning?
I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I've been in Michigan for about 26 years. I'm originally from Canada. My father was in the Canadian Air Force. I'm a military brat. I went to high school in Ottawa. When I came to Michigan, I was a planning consultant in Genesee County for 7 years. So I worked for a multidiscipline consulting firm, which was good because I got to work on all kinds of different projects, master plans, zoning ordinances, parks and recreation plans. And after 7 years, I was hired as a principal planner for the city of Troy. That was in 2002. In 2010, I was promoted to planning director, and a few months ago, I was promoted to community development director. I still play the role of the planning director for the city of Troy, but I've taken on some additional responsibilities.
And what does the community development director do? What are those responsibilities?
I still oversee planning and code enforcement, but I also now oversee our building department.
Is the city of Troy still growing?
It's the population is fairly tapered off for the most part, but most of the vacant farmers' fields are for the most part long gone. There's not a lot of vacant property left, but there's a lot of tear downs, a lot of assemblies and infills like we're talking about now.
Yeah, I remember years ago Troy still had a lot of cornfields. I remember watching the Somerset collection being built and the Kresge headquarters. It really went through a rapid growth, but there's still a lot of new construction occurring in Troy.
Yeah, definitely. Our farmers' fields are gone. Our parking lots are now our farmers' fields. That's the opportunity.
What's this an illustration of Big Beaver Road looking at I-75?
This illustrates the quality of streetscape that we're looking to find in that automotive realm with a tree canopy. You see the public art, other elements to improve the automotive portion of Big Beaver. Again, it's still an automotive focused road in that it's got 6 lanes of traffic, but there's still ways to improve that.
So did you consider getting rid of all the cars on Big Beaver and making it a pedestrian walkable street? Yeah,
I don't think the road commission would support that. They do support the concepts of the plan, though. They were really great to work with, but at its core, its main function is still to move automobiles through Troy.
This is a really interesting building. Tell us about this. This is on Big Beaver by I-75, right next to the City Hall.
Yes, this is DMC Children's Hospital. It's a 3-story building. It's about 65,000 square feet, and it's one of our first multi-story buildings that were approved under the zoning ordinance. This is a really cool building. if someone asked me where would I find DMC Children's Hospital, I'd say go to Big Beaver and you'll see it. Well, what does it look like? You'll know when you see it. The colored masonry blocks are beautiful. The use of the windows, different colored glass. At night, this is a gorgeous building. But notice it's still very close proximity to Big Beaver Road. It's got windows and doors that face Big Beaver. The activity in the building is visible from the street. Parking, you'll notice, behind the building. So it's in the forefront of Big Beaver, and it adds just a beautiful building to that streetscape of Big Beaver.
It is a really beautiful building.
Yeah.
It seems like over time you're really building a walkable downtown, because eventually these voids will be filled with new buildings built up to the sidewalk.
Absolutely, and we established the vision for Big Beaver in 2006. It's now almost 2020, so we're 14 years in. It's a process. We're not where we want to be, but we're well on our way, I think.
Here's some new residential buildings along Big Beaver. Tell us about these.
So this is actually something I want to talk about. This is in another form-based district. It's actually not Big Beaver. This is located at the corner of Square Lake Road and Livernois, but it is form-based zoning. And why I thought this was important was we have a need for alternative housing types than just single-family residential, which is what most people think of when they think of Troy. We need more attached housing and more dense. That's that D word that we've talked about before, Bob, density. And what we've got at 21 intersections of major mile roads throughout the city, we've got these form-based districts where, like Big Beaver, we want the building to relate more to the street, and we want to provide a mix of uses and also more various housing types. This was the first multifamily development. It's 43 units, and it was approved under our neighborhood node zoning district, which is somewhat similar to Big Beaver. Some pushback because we introduce density to a corner that has never seen density before. So I think this project is really well designed and well done. There are residents of the city who disagree with me, to be fair. I think in part because of the density, to be honest. But you see this building also relates to Square Lake Road, and really kind of announces itself as part of that road.
So it's on a major road, Square Lake
Yes.
Road. And
It's on Livernois, just south of Square Lake
okay,
Road.
Livernois.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all residential,
Yes.
3 stories. And are these apartments or condominiums, one on top of another?
These are condominiums. They're vertical. So you see the image on the screen. You would go in and you'd go up.
Oh,
Yeah, you go up
so like a townhome.
like a townhome. Yes.
Okay, great. But with a busy road like that, it probably would be a little odd to put a single-family house or a lower density on that.
I would agree, and I think that was one of the reasons that the developer sought this site out, is because of that the character of that road.
It offers maybe a transition from a busy street into a neighborhood or subdivision. Okay, is this another view of Big Beaver Road? What's this?
This is the new development at 888 West Big Beaver. This is located on the north side of Big Beaver, the corner of northeast corner of Crooks and Big Beaver. This is called what's the name of it? Troy Center Development. This is where your expertise comes in, Bob. I put this slide in for you. This is the ground level of a parking deck, a 7-story parking deck, where they've activated the ground floor by introducing a coffee shop and a workout facility and a massage facility into the ground floor of that parking lot, and actually helped to create an internal street between the parking deck and the buildings that front on Big Beaver. There's actually a street that's been created internal to the development.
This is interesting on so many levels. First of all, it's fascinating to put retail on the first level of a parking garage. And congratulations for getting the retail to have a lot of glass and clear glass. Very often it's tinted glass. But also this was an office building that was redeveloped, and there was a lot of new retail and restaurants added to this
That's right.
Utilized site.
That's right. When the developer purchased it, the developer is called Unicorp. They're out of Orlando, Florida. There was a 13-story building that I think was not at 100% occupancy. There was a 2-story parking deck that looked like it was safe, but I've seen nicer parking decks in Michigan, and the developer put numerous buildings on Big Beaver, restaurants and other retail buildings on Big Beaver, also on Crooks, a Seasons 52 and a Yard House restaurant. Then added that 7-story parking deck, and there's a 270-unit apartment building that's proposed to be attached to that parking deck. That's going to be starting construction very soon. So a very significant mixed-use development at the corner of Crooks and Big Beaver.
This is a really interesting trend to take commercial property, maybe just office, developed in 20, 30 years ago, and then keeping the primary use, but then infilling retail and restaurants and residential on the same set of property.
And adding value to that site, and adding a, and this is a view of the development in its entirety. You see the existing 13-story building that was repainted and had some significant work done inside, and then you see the parking deck to the right. It's a beautiful parking deck, and to the right, on the right side of that parking deck, on the north side of it, there will be a 7-story, 270-unit apartment building.
It is a very beautiful parking deck. It's got artistic color panels and such, and it's got an internal main street. I think this is a very interesting project to be a good case study. There's a lot of communities in Michigan that have older commercial suburbs that probably could have an infill. And I understand back in the 60s and 70s, sites were developed with twice the parking they're building today. So in a lot of cases, these parking lots could be infilled with other uses.
A couple things to add to that comment, Bob. I agree 100%. One is when we comprehensively updated our zoning ordinance in 2011, we took a serious look at our parking, and we wanted to make sure we got it right, because we did find, as you said, that we required too much parking for a number of different uses. As per this parking deck, it is a really nice parking deck. The city actually incentivized the construction of this parking deck. Our DDA developed a new program called QDI, which stands for Quality Development Initiative, where a certain percentage of the recapture of the incremental increase in the property value goes back to the developer. So in a way, it incentivizes, because they're very expensive, as you know. They can be $20,000 to $25,000 a space for a parking deck.
It's almost impossible for the private sector to build a garage all on its own.
Right.
So there was a public-private sort of partnership
Right.
there.
And as you know, if you want to truly be walkable, you've got to have deck parking. You can't get to walkability with surface parking.
You can't do it.
You can't do it.
There's another new building along Big Beaver.
So this is the ground floor, the first floor retail that fronts on the project that we spoke about. This is although it's a 1-story building, the architect developed this with very high ceilings, with a tower element on the corner. So even though it's a 1-story building, it engages the street and has a strong relationship with the street. This is a Shake Shack building, part of that same development. And the reason I included these slides is to show you the quality, the architectural quality. I mentioned earlier that internal street. If you go back to that Shake Shack slide really quickly, this is across the street from that parking deck where the first floor retail was. And you can see the quality elements here, the lighting, the sidewalk, and other elements that make this a people place. Even though it's a street, it's comfortable for pedestrians.
We're going to have to wrap it up. I'd like to end with a project that's on the boards for the City of Troy. First of all, thank you very much for joining us today. This is fascinating. I think the City of Troy really has been a progressive, visionary community in how to retrofit these aging suburbs and how to adapt new planning principles. Talk us a little bit about this one that you're approving right now.
This went before the Planning Commission last Tuesday. It received preliminary site plan approval and special use approval. This is a Hyatt Place Hotel. It's a 6-story building with a Ford's Garage building fronting on this project with rooftop dining on top of the Ford's Garage. From what I hear, I've never been to Ford's Garage. There's one in Dearborn. It's a very dynamic, fun restaurant, and this is a quality development that's really going to add to the Big Beaver streetscape.
Brent, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a fascinating talk about the city's vision and implementation of these new planning principles, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you for watching Michigan Planning Today. I'm your host, Bob Gibbs, and we look forward to seeing you again in the near future.